Welcome back to the Global Ledger. I'm Justin. If there's one word that gets used constantly in finance, and one that's probably the least understood, it's risk. Investors talk about it, models try to measure it, and regulators definitely try to contain it, and markets price it. Okay, and yet when crises happen, almost everyone is surprised. That's because most investors, I think, are taught to think about risk in a way that works only when the system is calm. Today's episode is about what investors consistently misunderstand about risk. Not because they're careless, but I think because the framework itself is incomplete. Let's get into it. So I'm going to make a claim here, and I'm going to say risk is not volatility. Okay? I think that's one of the most common mistakes, is equating risk with volatility. Clearly, volatility is visible, and it's measurable. It fits neatly into nice charts and nice dashboards, which are credible. But volatility is not risk. Okay? It's a symptom. True risk is about funding continuity. True risk is about liquidity, access, rollover certainty, and balance sheet constraints. Some of the riskiest positions in history appeared low volatility right up until they failed. Okay, so diversification fails, I think, when it's needed most. Investors are taught that diversification reduces risk. That is true, okay? Until, it isn't true. In normal times, assets diversify by geography, sector, and strategy. Okay, in stress, everything converges around one factor: who needs funding and who can still provide it. This is why correlations spike, portfolios collapse together, and uncorrelated strategies fail simultaneously. The risk wasn't hidden, it was systemic. Many investors assume liquidity is a property of the asset. It really isn't. Liquidity is a relationship between holders, dealers, balance sheets, and collateral acceptance. Okay, when conditions change, liquidity disappears, even for assets that were liquid yesterday. This is why selling pressure accelerates, not because people want to sell, but because they must sell. And leverage is not the enemy at all. And again, everything has its pros and cons, if you will, but leverage isn't inherently bad. In fact, it's really essential to how modern finance functions. The problem is short-term leverage funded by confidence. Okay? That's the problem. Short-term leverage funded by confidence. When leverage depends on daily rollover, stable collateral values, uninterrupted market access, it becomes fragile. Risk isn't leverage itself, it's leverage without funding resilience. Another misconception is that risk shows up where it originates. And in reality, it shows up where balance sheets are, I think, weakest. And this is why. Safe assets break, hedges fail, and intermediaries become the epicenter. And risk mitigates through the system before it becomes visible. By the time prices move, the real damage it's already done. In models, okay, we need to talk about that. They don't fail, okay? The assumptions do. Risk models don't fail because they're wrong. They fail because they assume liquidity, okay? They assume continuous markets. They assume diversification will hold, and they also assume funding is available. When those assumptions break, the outputs become meaningless. The danger isn't models, it's forgetting what they assume. So Here's a better way to think about risk. A more durable view of risk asks different questions. Okay, and here they are. How is this position funded? What happens if markets close temporarily? Who provides liquidity in stress? What balance sheets does this depend on? And how does this behave when volatility rises because funding breaks? These questions don't eliminate risk, but they make it visible early on. And that's what's important. So, why does this matter now? Okay, we live in a world of large balance sheets, tighter regulation, faster markets, and global funding chains, which means risk doesn't build slowly. It accumulates very quietly and releases suddenly. Understanding risk today is less about forecasting returns and more about understanding system behavior. This episode brings us to kind of the edge of the series. Because once you understand the things that we've talked about, like liquidity, funding, balance sheets, policy mechanics, valuation under stress, and real risk, there's really only one thing left to do, okay? And that's to put it all together. And in episode 100, the final episode of the global ledger we've built, we're going to talk about a complete mental model of modern finance, okay? Not theory, and not a spreadsheet or an Excel model, which those are great, but a way of seeing the system, okay? A viewpoint of seeing the system as it actually is, okay? And that's next, and it's the accumulation, really, of everything we've built so far. So thank you for listening to episode 99. I'm Justin, and thank you for being here.